This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. October 10th is World Mental Health Day, and this year we're saying thank you, therapists. BetterHelp therapists have helped over 5 million people worldwide on their mental health journeys. That's millions of stories, millions of journeys, and behind every one is a therapist who showed up, listened, and helped someone take a step forward. Moments in therapy, like the right question, a safe space to cry, or a small win, can change lives. This World Mental Health Day, BetterHelp is honoring those connections and the therapists who make them possible, while showing how easy it is to get guidance from a licensed therapist online with BetterHelp. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. And it works with an average rating of 4.9 out of 5 for a live session based on over 1.7 million client reviews. This World Mental Health Day, we're celebrating the therapists who've helped millions of people take a step forward. If you're ready to find the right therapist for you, BetterHelp can help you start that journey. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/PFF. That's betterhelp.com/PFF. Another massive noon game here. Number 12, Georgia Tech at Duke. It's on noon on ESPN. This game could be pivotal in deciding who plays in the ACC title game later on in December. Georgia Tech and Duke are two of the 5 remaining ACC teams this year who are undefeated in conference play. The Yellow Jackets are undefeated overall this year, the perfect 6-0 record. And if they win this game, they may finish the year undefeated in conference play, which would put them at an 11-1 record at least overall. Can still play Georgia at the very end of the year too, but 11-1 Georgia Tech going into the ACC title game could be in the playoff regardless. Remember, SMU last year was 11-1 before losing to Clemson. They still made the playoff. Georgia Tech could be in a very similar boat if they beat Duke, because their schedule the rest of the year is relatively easy after this Duke game in the ACC too. So, like I said, that could pretty much lock up a playoff spot for Georgia Tech if they win this game, and of course win the remaining ACC games too. Duke, meanwhile, is 4-2 this year, but their 2 losses came out of conference to Illinois and Tulane. Duke has every opportunity to make it to Charlotte in December, and if you make it to the ACC title game, you can lock up a playoff spot automatically if you win the ACC title game. So Duke pretty much needs to win out and make the ACC title game and win it to make the playoff, but winning this game against Georgia Tech will go a long way in determining that.
Yeah, Georgia Tech's got an interesting road, and remember how they played Georgia last year. Don't just take that game for granted as a loss, plus they get it at home, but you look at their next 4, and you look at Syracuse, NC State, Boston College, and Pitt. If Georgia Tech gets by this game, you really do feel like you have a road to go undefeated in the ACC and locking in that conference title spot, in one of those. And then Duke, they're in a huge stretch. 3 of their next 4 games are Georgia Tech, Clemson, Virginia. That's going to decide their season right there. If they were to get through those 3 games, all of them undefeated in ACC play, they got a couple easier ones on the back end, then you're talking about them being the second place team here. We assume behind Miami, but you don't want to just count games before they happen, but that's really the way it seems like the ACC is shaking out. So this is an absolutely massive game, and yes, you could argue, aside from the Georgia game, at least in ACC play, that this is the biggest game left on Georgia Tech's schedule.
Absolutely. All right, Dalton, you have the Duke offense with one of the highest graded quarterbacks in the country in Darian Mensah. What should we know when the Blue Devils have the ball in this game?
I think, and Mensah, don't get me wrong, he has been outstanding this year, right? Against Illinois, some turnovers hurt him, same thing against Tulane, but for the most part, he has been terrific. I believe he's got a top 5 passing grade in the country. He does. He's got the second highest passing grade in the country behind Julian Sayin. But I think something that struck me watching these 3 wins that they've gotten, these 3 consecutive wins they've gotten before this game, is that Mensah is throwing the football less, and they might have a star emerging in true freshman running back Nate Shepard. I actually didn't know this till I looked at it this week, because I was like, man, who is this back that's just teeing off all of a sudden on these other ACC teams? He's actually the little brother of former Colorado receiver Will Shepard, currently on the Green Bay Packers practice squad. So this kid is outstanding. He's got an 86 rushing grade. They've gone to him more the last 3 games, 12th best rushing grade in the country, 56 carries, 19 missed tackles forced, a really good ratio, 16 explosive runs. I mean, you're talking about a guy that the speed that he gives you. Jaquez Moore was kind of struggling. Anderson Castle's a bigger, more physical between the tackles back. This kid, a true freshman running back, is making the difference and giving more balance to this offense. And I'm telling you right now, Max, he's got blazing speed. There is not another player to me in this offense that has the speed like this. So, when you talk about, okay, the headline of this Duke team was Darian Mensah coming in the portal for all that money, and he's throwing to Cooper Barkate and Quayshawn Brown. But the first 3 games when they went 1-2, they were way too one-dimensional. They couldn't find enough explosive runs to balance this thing out. Nate Shepherd is the guy giving it to them. And if Duke can continue to be two-dimensional on offense with the way that Mensah's been throwing the ball all season, they're an incredibly dangerous offense now. I think that's really what it is the true freshman back Shepherd has made the biggest difference for this team between the 1-2 start and now winning 3 games in a row where they've scored at least 38 points in each one.
Yeah, I am looking at Georgia Tech's offense in this one against Duke's secondary, which may have finally turned the corner right now. If you remember, in our offseason rankings, I had Duke as one of the 10 best secondaries in college football. They had superstars like cornerback Chandler Rivers and safety Terry Moore. Chandler Rivers and Terry Moore were the highest graded players in the Power 4 last year at cornerback and safety. Terry Moore has not played yet this year. He's recovering from a torn ACL he suffered last season. Chandler Rivers has played this year. And with Terry Moore out, Duke's secondary really, really struggled to begin the season. From weeks 1 through 4 this year, Duke had a 43 coverage grade, which was dead last in the entire country. But Duke has turned it around in the last 2 games against Syracuse and Cal. Since week 5, they have an 85.6 coverage grade. That's 3rd in the Power 4 and 8th in the entire country. So again, the worst coverage grade in the country from weeks 1 through 4. From weeks 5 through 7, they have the 8th best coverage grade in the country. I will say, though, it is worth pointing out, Syracuse was on their backup quarterback in that game, and Ricky Collins, because Steve Angeli, of course, is out for the year with a torn Achilles. But still, Duke secondary has played great football over their last 2 games. This week will prove, though, if Duke's secondary has truly improved, because Georgia Tech quarterback Haynes King has an 82% adjusted completion rate this year. The only quarterback in the nation with a higher adjusted completion rate is, of course, Ohio State quarterback Julian Sayin. The Yellow Jackets also have very, very talented receivers like Isaiah Canyon, Eric Rivers, and Malik Rutherford. Those guys might be able to separate against a Duke defense that runs a lot of man coverage too. So again, Duke secondary, which has been a major issue for most of this year, but has rebounded nicely in the last 2 games, they will be tested this week against Haynes King and those receivers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about Eric Rivers on the outside. You're talking about Malik Rutherford on the outside, is always flying around the field. Haynes King has been really good. So I think there's going to be this constant battle, and there always is with Georgia Tech. Can you keep them behind the chains, right? Can you stop the run on early downs and get them in obvious passing situations? Even a 3rd and 7 is not necessarily where Georgia Tech wants to be. And then the interesting part, as always, we've talked about it before with Manny Diaz and the blitz packages in those situations. Haynes King's passing grade is 20 points lower when he is blitzed compared to when he's not. So you're talking about, look, Manny Diaz is going to show him those looks, but he's got to get a chance to do it, because if you line up in a lot of those flat looks, those mug looks on 3rd and 2, they're liable to just wash you down and run the football right by you, right? So it's going to be big on early downs for Duke to stop Georgia Tech in this elite run game they have. Malachi Hosley's been outstanding lately. Jamal Haynes is always good. And, of course, Haynes King himself is just going to try to will him to a win at times. So I think you've got a great matchup of 2 different styles, although I think Duke's offense is getting into more of a 2-dimensional style here as opposed to, the 50 times a game that Mensah was throwing earlier in the year. But it's always going to be about, against Georgia Tech, how many times can you get them in obvious passing situations and make Haynes King beat you from the pocket?
So Dalton, Georgia Tech, number 12 in the country right now. They are undefeated in the season, but they are underdogs this week on the road against Duke in a game that could decide who potentially plays Miami in the ACC title game later on in December. Who will win between Georgia Tech and Duke?
I suppose it's that old thing from The Office, right? I'm ready to be hurt again, because the first 2 Duke games that we had, I picked Duke in both games, and they let me down.
Yep.
And I'm going to do it a 3rd time. We're going to go again. And I actually believe, watching the last 3 games, I do believe Nate Shepherd's presence in the backfield has made this a different offense, because as opposed to having Mensah throwing 50 times a game, he's throwing 35-ish times a game, right? And I think that's just more ideal for any quarterback to have that balance in the offense, and Shepherd is super explosive. I also think Georgia Tech has gotten away. They've gotten away with a few of them, right? Even the first game against Colorado, behind early. The Wake Forest game, battling all the way to overtime. You could argue they shouldn't have won that game. They were better against Virginia Tech Tech last week, but that's Virginia Tech. It's not a great situation there. I don't know how much yet still that I trust this Georgia Tech defense. I'm going to ride Duke, and I think it's going to be a very hard-fought game because Haynes King absolutely will not quit. We know that for a fact. Maybe the toughest player in college football. Blue Devils 31, Yellow Jackets 28.
I have Georgia Tech winning this game 35-34. I think both quarterbacks in this game, and Haynes King and Darian Mensah, could have success against inconsistent at best secondaries this year. This game could turn into a shootout. I think the Yellow Jackets survive that shootout and continue their undefeated season. But like my score suggests, it's going to be a nail-biter. I think it's going to be an incredible ball game that will be massive in determining who moves on to the ACC title game later on in December, too. So we've differed on the last two games, Dalton, with LSU and Vandy and Georgia Tech and Duke.